YouTube, Awesome Writer here, and happy Power Rangers Day 2024. I almost forgot this was happening, honestly. It pops around every August in honor of when mmpr first premiered, and it wasn't until I got on Twitter and saw people posting about it that I remembered it, just because, you know, obviously I've done Power Rangers related videos with the comics and other like news and speculation, but it's been a dormant year. There's not a main show or anything like that, and we're in this quiet period, which is one of the things I'm going to talk about. So I just kind of forgot about it, and I just kind of wanted to do a little bit of a freeform discussion on the state of everything right now. Just look at the state of it. And talking about like what a stark contrast it is from last year, thinking about Power Rangers Day. I couldn't remember what I did last year and I had to look it up. I did like my favorite things about Power Rangers video or whatever. But looking back at last year, you know, we had Once and Always, and then we had Cosmic Fury. You know, this time last year, Cosmic Fury, I don't think had come out yet. I think that people wanted it to come out on Power Rangers Day, but it didn't. Anyway, but we had those two things going, and at the time, we thought the reboot was on the horizon. And then, of course, within this year, there's been no main show or anything. We got the announcement that the Netflix deal is no longer going forward because Hasbro kind of got cold feet on doing the reboot and wanted to do something else that was supposedly like effectively an mmpr reimagining, and they passed on it. So right now, we don't know what's going on, and we're in a very quiet, kind of dark period. You know, people over dramatize it, but you know what I mean, for the franchise compared to last year. It is kind of crazy when you really think about it. And there's two things that are interesting to talk about, which is something we've talked about a lot, but the future, like, I have no idea what the future holds right now, honestly. I'm really curious what Hasbro is thinking behind the scenes about the show for the future. You know, right now, it doesn't seem like there's anything on the horizon. The last rumor was that mmpr, like, reimagining and that they were shopping around, but we haven't heard anything since then. You know, and even the mmpr reimagining was a rumor, so whatever the pitch was that Netflix rejected, that was what they were shopping. But then they also sold all their props. I think at the time I made the video about it, it seemed like it was only the Once and Always related stuff in Cosmic Fury, but I guess it was like literally everything they had, which was kind of a signal to people that they had no immediate plans. I mean, that was only a signal to me in terms of mmpr because I thought they'd want to keep some of those assets if they were doing a reimagining. Some people did point out, though, that those were like specifically tailored to like the Once and Always cast. However, of course you can change it a little bit. Like, you know, it's not like they're crazy proportions or something. You could probably tailor the Blue Ranger suit to fit whoever was going to wear it, like a stunt person or a cast member or whatever. But anyway, the point is that right now we just have no idea what's going to happen. Hasbro very much, like, I hate to use these phrases because people said don't really care that much. They just kind of want to make whatever money they can, and they have no larger ambitions, because we've talked about that at nauseum, how what was his name, Brian Goldberg or whatever, was the one that wanted to do all these big plans, and after his passing, no one really has any big plans. So I'm definitely curious, like, what we'll see in the future. I've talked about before how I'm very confident Power Rangers will come back. That's not like a pro Hasbro thing, that's just a pro Power Rangers franchise thing, because it's a weird brand where it's not very respected and it's not hugely popular, but it's recognizable enough that I believe at some point in the future someone will want to make something happen with it. It could be 2 years from now, it could be 10 years from now. I really think that in the future there will be some sort of reboot-like attempt like they were talking about. I just don't know how long it'll be. It could be, like I said, even as far as 10 years into the future. I'm just kind of curious in the more short term what they're going to do. Like, is there ever going to be an attempt to do something like that mmpr reimagining or bringing back Sentai adaptions and stuff like that? Or would they sell it? I don't know. Like, if they ever do have a attempt to like make PR big again, I'm curious, will it be at Hasbro? Will somebody be hired or multiple people be hired that see potential in it? Will they sell it? Who knows? We don't know right now. We are currently in a very quiet period, but at least it's not a totally dead period to look on like the positive side of things. You know, it is kind of interesting to think about that the current like quiet period we have now is pretty similar to quiet periods lots of other franchises have had, where you have like ongoing comic, you have various merchandise with third parties and stuff like that. We have a video game, and lots of franchises have existed like that for like years, maybe even a decade or less or more. And that's kind of crazy when you think about it, that PR had existed almost continuously for 30 years. It ran like clockwork, and I think that's why it seems so bad for a lot of fans. I mean, it's not a great spot for the franchise, don't get me wrong, but it could be worse. Like, I mean, I think Hasbro's Comic-Con booth was pretty pitiful. I think they had like 2 shirts in a corner or whatever, but it could be worse. Like, when we thought the comics were gonna wind down, it really did seem like Hasbro was just gonna let everything go outside of letting companies like Super 7 or whatever make figures, but they did renew their contract with Boom, and we have a bunch of other stuff happening. So again, every time I say anything, I'm worried people are gonna say it. I'm not defending it, I'm just explaining stuff that, like, I think that for the Power Rangers fandom, because we're so used to it running like clockwork, and the fact that it effectively never really went on a big break for almost 30 years, not to mention so many fans of Power Rangers became fans of Sentai and Rider, which also run even more like clockwork. I think the fandom brains get accustomed to like, this is the way it should always be, when in reality, lots of franchises have experienced a quiet period like this for one reason or another, and they almost always come back. It definitely could be worse. Hasbro could have let everything go, so at least we have kind of a classic franchise dormant period, where we have like the comic stuff happening. Actually, happy about the comic continuing, especially in the form it's continuing, doing this reimagining, kind of like an Ultimate Universe type thing. I think that's really cool, and I think that can really be like the lifeblood in terms of like content. Like obviously there's gonna be merchandise and stuff, but that can be the lifeblood in terms of content to keep like the hardcore fans interested. You know, even Star Wars, in the gap between the original trilogy and the prequels and the Clone Wars and all the bigger gaps they had before the Disney era, existed solely on books, comics, and merchandise and stuff like that. So almost every franchise has had that. Like I said, it's just that this fandom is so used to it running like clockwork, it seems like culture shock. Like honestly, it's insane the amount of, ever since the Neo Saban era, the amount of like normal practices Power Rangers has followed compared to other TV shows that like shock Power Rangers fans. I'm like, have you ever watched any other shows? I know there was that period between RPM and Samurai where that reversioning happened that people always cite when I say, oh, it ran like clockwork. I'm like, that was barely a blip on the radar. In fact, that just adds to how crazy it is that Power Rangers basically existed continually for 30 years, is the fact that that gap was almost nothing. Thanks to the MMPR reversioning, which sounds weird, but because of that, you know, we had the MMPR reversioning and then it kept the toys on the shelves. So you had RPM, MMPR toys, and then Samurai. So it was like, there was really no gap in a way. Like the fact that the gap was so small and that Saban brought it back was insane, like if you think about it. So I barely even think of that as a gap because it all happened so fast. Of course, the other big thing on the horizon, or I guess sort of big thing, is the fact that we are doing the Playmates toys next year. I think they briefly talked about that at Comic-Con. They just said it's going to come out next year. I'm so curious to see what that's going to look like. I imagine, honestly, the toys will be pretty good because some of the Playmates stuff that I've collected for like Turtles and Ben 10 at the time when they did regular Ben 10 toys were actually pretty solid. So that is interesting that we're going to have that there, and that was why there was a rumor that they wanted to get the Power Rangers show like out as a MMPR reimagining so that they could line it up with that. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely like probably one of the darker and quieter periods, but at least it's not nothing, because I very easily could have seen a scenario where they just let everything go, and at least we're going to have some merchandise happening and we have the comics to keep it going. You know, it's a dark period, but I'm still optimistic for the future. Not necessarily the immediate future, but I think one day it will be picked up again in some form. I'm just curious whether it's going to be like a long gap of no show or nothing, and then there's some sort of reimagining push, or if there's going to be like a midway point where we get that MMPR reboot and maybe Sentai adaptions return. I don't know, but again, optimistic for more the far future. I think for the immediate future, I'm just grateful that there's some stuff continuing, and it's just kind of a classic dormant period in a lot of ways. But what are your guys' hopes for the future? Do you want it to be a longer break before reimagining, or do you hope to see something in a few years like that MMPR reversioning, or like a Sentai adaptation returning? Now I'm just thinking about, what if they did an MMPR re-reversioning, where they just did the MMPR reversioning show, but put even more Bams and Pows over the Bams and Pows? That's what I want for the future. No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, guys, until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps to ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.